What's up? What's up, everybody? Armchair Quarterbacks here for another Week 8 preview. This one we've got This Host Slaps versus You're on Mahomes Kid. That is Alex versus Michelle. Now, really quick, I do want to speak to Michelle here. I know you and I have gone back and forth with several trade offers, back and forth, counter. And I know Shawn has mentioned it to you before, not to overvalue your players. So I just want to speak on this in case you're only watching yours and not watching anybody else's. I did bring it up in another video, but there are some other things that some useful websites you can look at to try and find some trade values here. So besides looking at a player's stat line, and their rankings for the season and whatnot, seeing how you like the player, how you feel for the player, you can also get a numbered value for that player. So if you go on Google and you type in your search bar something like fantasy football trade value chart, you can come up to CBS Sports and Fantasy Pros. Those are the two that I like to go with the most. CBS Sports pretty much, they have one person that's culminating maybe like 4 or 5 analysts' numbers all together and coming up with a trade value. So, for example, Christian McCaffrey in non-PPR, he's supposedly worth 43 points, and in PPR worth 46 points. So, if you're trying to trade, say, Pollard for CMC, obviously Pollard is 27 points, so you're going to have to throw in another player to match the 43 there, just for an example. And then same thing with Fantasy Pros, but Fantasy Pros has like 100 analysts or something like that. They have a ton of analysts that they pretty much combine all of their rankings to formulate the trade values for all the players. So again, same thing here. So like if we're looking at Jalen Hurts, he's got a value of 29.4. If you're trying to trade for him, and let's say, for example, my Justin Herbert, 17.7. I need to throw in another player at 17.7 plus whatever to match 29.4 or go over, however, depending on what the manager feels. So just that's it really quick. Just going over that, making sure you remember not to overvalue players during trades. I know sometimes there have been trades that I've offered, and sometimes I know it or sometimes I don't know it. Where it's kind of a really shitty trade, a really crappy trade. So it's here or there, but again, it's not only trade values there, it's also how the manager themselves feels about that specific player. All right, so let's get into this Week 8 recap here. Alex is currently starting Jared Goff, Tyreek Hill, Marquise Brown, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, Sam Laporta, George Pickens, and Alexander Madison. So Jared Goff and Sam Laporta, they're currently playing against Vegas. That's a Monday night game. It'll be interesting to see because these offenses have been pretty decent, in terms of passing the ball. Jared Goff has been mostly good. He's had a few down games, but he's going into his bye. I think he's going to want to go into his bye with a win and not have to deal with trying to figure out, okay, what's going wrong with our defense? Why did we lose to Vegas? And yada, yada, yada. He's got Amon-Ra St. Brown. He can consistently throw to. He might get David Montgomery back, which is going to work for him in terms of if they get down to the red zone, the goal line, and they can't throw it in, they're going to give it to David Montgomery to pound the ball. Again, he's also got Sam Laporta, who has been a really consistent and very good rookie tight end. Rookies aren't normally this good in the tight end position, but he's been producing really good. His numbers don't look it because he's only got 3 touchdowns. But if you're looking at the receptions and the yardage, if you look at any other tight end, most tight ends don't have this many receptions and this many yardage. So really, if he gets the touchdown, that's just bonus points. You're going to be ecstatic about that. But everything else, he's been efficient with the catching and with the yardage. So you're going to love him either way for the most part. Tyreek Hill, You got to watch his injury reports. There was a report today he didn't practice with a hip injury. So if he doesn't play this week, I think the Dolphins can spare to not play him this week because they still have Jalen Waddle and they still have Raheem Mostert. They're still a really high-powered offense. So it's you just got to watch the practice reports. And again, I spoke on that before too. Finding the practice reports, you can find it on Google. You search NFL practice reports. You can find RotoWire. I like RotoWire practice reports because they give the injury, the day, and then the status. Questionable. So let's see if they updated Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill. Questionable status, hip injury, did not participate this Wednesday. So that's another resource you can use to find out if a player is going to play or not. If you're not getting the Twitter updates for the practice reports. Marquise Brown. I'm curious to see how he's going to be when Kyler Murray comes back. Obviously he's been pretty decent with Josh Dobbs, but and depending on when Kyler Murray comes back too, Marquise Brown, he is their leading receiver. He's their number one receiver. So you're going to play him if you need him to play. But what that production looks like is going to be up in the air until we see some consistency, with whether or not Kyler Murray is going to play or Josh Dobbs is going to play. So if Kyler Murray plays, I don't expect that much of a drop in usage. Efficiency might go down though because Kyler Murray's coming off the ACL injury from last year, so he might not be able to scramble and extend the play. He might end up just taking the sack. Don't know. Alvin Kamara. Oh my goodness, this guy has been getting a ton of usage. He's been very efficient since he came back. I want to see him do very well against Indianapolis because then it's gonna boost some of the indie players as well, and I like some of the indie players. The only thing here with Alvin Kamara, if Derek Carr, if his shoulder is starting to get better and more healthy, Derek Carr is going to be able to throw it down the field more, which means these 14 targets right here probably going to go down a little bit. But again, Alvin Kamara has been very efficient with his usage, so I don't think you're going to see too much dip there. Derrick Henry here, there's a lot of speculation, a lot of talk that the Titans might finally step away from Derrick Henry and trade him. I would be very curious to see what team he goes to, because he still looks pretty decent. That's just he's had hit or miss games here and there. But Derrick Henry is still, like, in his decent games, he's looking beast. How you don't see this often. 12 rushing attempts for 97 yards. Not a lot of players can do that. Usually they need 15 plus rushing attempts just to get 70 or 80 yards. So Derrick Henry, if he goes to a team that really rushes the ball and really needs a running back, he can be really beast. But for now, staying with the Titans, going up against Atlanta, who is very good on run defense, and they've been playing pretty decently on offense as of late. I don't know. I have question marks on this, but it's Derrick Henry. He's got the past behind him. He's got the history, so you kind of have to start him. George Pickens, he's a splash ceiling player, but I do like how much he's been used and how much he's been thrown to by Kenny Pickett. I believe he's not currently the wide receiver one on their depth chart, but I believe George Pickens is favored by Kenny Pickett. So he's seen really good games. So as long as this stays consistent, not even trying to get over 100 yards, but more so getting 8+ targets per game, if that can happen, oh man, he's gonna be pretty good. And then last but not least, we have Alexander Mattison. Alexander Mattison, he had a rough going game against San Francisco. He did leave for a second, and I thought, that he was leaving with like a concussion or some kind of injury, because he was laying down on the ground for a while, and we talked about that in the week 7 recap videos as well. But he got back into the game, so I don't think he's like injured in terms of he's not going to be able to play. But again, watch those practice reports. You never know, something might pop up later on. But he hasn't been as efficient, and Cam Akers looked a little bit better than Madison when he got into the game. So that's one other thing to watch there. But I don't think you really have much other players. I mean, you can try to chase the Jahmyr Gibbs points, but that's one of those things where you got to watch if David Montgomery is coming back or not. DK Metcalf also, you got to watch to see if he's going to play. He did get in a limited practice today, so that's good. But if he stays limited, he might be doubtful or questionable for this week's games. So now taking a look at Michelle's team here, she's currently starting Patrick Mahomes, Brandon Ayuk, Michael Thomas, DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, Evan Engram, Drake London, and DJ Njoku. Patrick Mahomes up against Denver. I got nothing else to say. That's going to be a good game for Patrick Mahomes. Brandon Ayuk against Cincinnati. Again, two high-powered offenses, San Francisco and Cincinnati. And me and Shawn have harped on it all season pretty much. Brandon Ayuk, it's really going to be an Ayuk game, a Kittle game, a Deebo Samuel game, or a CMC game, really. But the good thing is Ayuk has been somewhat consistent for the most part. He's got some boom weeks, but for the most part, you're at least not 100% disappointed. At least he's not goosing you. You're not getting the big goose egg 0 points. Michael Thomas, again, same thing. He hasn't really had any boom weeks, but he has been consistent. So I think he, in the last game with the 11 points there, I think he was really he was really benefiting from Derek Carr having the kind of shoulder injury and not being able to throw it deep to Chris Olave. Because Michael Thomas, he's very well known for running the crossing routes, the slant routes, and grabbing the ball right down the middle. But either way, even if Derek Carr's shoulder starts to heal up and he can throw the ball deep again, I think Michael Thomas, he'll still be fine. He'll still be consistent. You just need somebody with more upside. DeAndre Swift, here's your upside player. Now, he didn't play so well in the past 2 or 3 games compared to his boom week. However, the Eagles are still, utilizing him pretty much as their primary back. In the past seasons, the Eagles have pretty much run a committee of running backs. They've utilized 3 running backs each game. But this one, obviously they're not using him CMC status 100% of the snaps. They're still subbing him out every so often for Kenneth Gainwell, I believe it is. But Swift is getting a majority of the snaps here. I don't think you're going to be disappointed with him in terms of his usage. Now, in terms of his efficiency, that's what you want to see. Everybody wants to see their players be extremely efficient. Up against Washington, I think that can happen. Evan Engram, he's pretty much, I mentioned it before, the only other passing option right now in Jacksonville. Calvin Ridley, he's kind of stinking it up right now. And I believe Zay Jones, I think he's still injured. So depending on what the game script is, Evan Engram, he might get some usage. He might get covered. He's been consistent with his targets. And he's been pretty consistent with his receptions. It's more so really just the yardage, how well he's getting the run after the catch, or how deep he's getting those catches. Drake London. Now, this is a player that Shawn and I have in the past advised possibly dropping or trading, just because, we mentioned we didn't like Desmond Ridder, excuse me. And we didn't like the Atlanta Falcons offense because it's looking like it's going to be schemed towards a heavy rushing offense. I think though in the past few weeks for sure that we have been proven wrong. At least in the past few weeks, Desmond Ridder has been playing really well. He's been consistently throwing the ball, and the Atlanta Falcons offense has been pretty balanced, more balanced than we expected. So I think Desmond Ridder is Drake London is a pretty decent play here up against Tennessee. They're going to stop the rush game, and unless Arthur Smith decides to play Bijan Robinson finally and actually let him loose, I don't think the rush game is going to get going really against the Tennessee Titans, and Desmond Ridder is going to have to end up throwing the ball out again. So I think London's going to be a benefactor there, and it's unseen how long that's going to last. We could get into the bye week, and finally, once the bye week happens, all of a sudden, then we're going to see the switch to the rushing game. Don't know. That's really up to Arthur Smith. He's the coach there. David Njoku. Oh boy, I don't know what to do with this player because I just don't like him. He has not really ever produced for me in fantasy. I think you could switch him out in your flex. I think you should switch him out maybe for KJ Osborne. KJ Osborne is looking like the wide receiver 2, the second option in Minnesota right now with Jefferson out. And I mean, if you look at it, 6 targets for 5 receptions, that's not bad for a wide receiver 2. For the team's wide receiver 2, that is. So I would look to switching out David Njoku. And I'm seeing here you finally moved Justin Jefferson to your IR spot. So you do have that empty bench spot, so you can pick up an additional player if you need to. So there you go. That's it for this week 8 recap. Good luck to you both, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.